There's a stretch of railway on Earth where construction workers refused to keep working at night. Not because they were tired, not because of the cold, because of what they said they saw: tools disappearing and reappearing somewhere else. Radios picking up voices that weren't part of any crew. Workers waking up in the middle of the night convinced someone was standing at the foot of their bed and finding no one there. And in one of the most extreme cases, an entire team refused to return to a section of track the next morning. They packed their bags. They left. No explanation given to their supervisors except one sentence, repeated over and over: "We are not going back there." This isn't a horror movie script. This is a real railway, built through a region considered one of the most dangerous, most sacred, and most feared stretches of land on the planet. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why some of the toughest workers in the world got spooked by a train track. Now here's the part that's going to hit closer to home than you expect. Think about a time you had to do something everyone told you not to do, a road nobody wanted to take, a decision that made people around you nervous, even if they couldn't explain why. Maybe it was a job, maybe it was a place. Maybe it was a warning from someone older, someone who just said don't without giving you a reason. That uneasy feeling? That's exactly what thousands of engineers, laborers, and railway workers felt when they were told, "We're building through here." Because here was the Qinghai Tibet Plateau, the highest, most extreme railway environment ever attempted by human engineers. A place locals had avoided for centuries. A place wrapped in legends of spirits guarding the land, of sacred grounds that were never meant to be disturbed by machines, explosives, or steel. And when construction began, strange things started happening almost immediately. So what actually went wrong out there? Was it the altitude playing tricks on exhausted minds? Was it something environmental science hadn't caught up with yet? Or was it something else? Something workers still won't fully talk about, even now? Let's go into what actually happened, because the deeper you dig, the stranger this story gets. The Qinghai Tibet Railway was one of the most ambitious construction projects in modern history. Engineers had to build across permafrost, meaning ground that's frozen almost year-round, at altitudes so high that oxygen levels drop to nearly half of what's normal at sea level. Used breathing out, there is a fight. Now imagine drilling, laying steel, and operating heavy machinery for hours at that altitude, in freezing temperatures thousands of feet above where the human body is designed to function properly. At that altitude, the brain doesn't get enough oxygen. And when that happens, something predictable occurs. Hallucinations, disorientation, a feeling of being watched, extreme fatigue that messes with perception and memory. Doctors call it hypoxia, and it's well documented in mountaineers, pilots, and high-altitude workers around the world. People see shapes that aren't there. They hear voices in the wind. They feel presences at the edge of their vision. Not because something supernatural is happening, but because their brain, starved of oxygen, is malfunctioning in ways that feel terrifyingly real. That's the scientific explanation. And on its own, it's enough to explain a lot of what workers experienced. But here's the twist that made even skeptical engineers pause. Some of the strangest incidents weren't reported by exhausted individuals working alone. They were reported by entire teams. Multiple workers in different locations describing the same sounds, the same shadows moving along the ridgelines at night, the same feeling of pressure in the air right before equipment would inexplicably fail. Coincidence? Group hysteria, spreading fear from one tired mind to another? Maybe, but local Tibetan communities had a different answer. Long before the railway was ever planned, they warned that this land was protected. Sacred mountains, spiritual guardians, places where the natural world simply wasn't meant to be touched by human ambition. And when construction crews began blasting through ridgelines considered holy for generations, some workers started to wonder if they'd broken a rule far older than engineering. Now here's the moment that changes how you look at this whole story. Despite everything, the railway got built. All the way to Lhasa, one of the highest railways on Earth, running straight through land that terrified the very people constructing it. And it stands today, fully operational, carrying passengers across scenery so breathtaking it barely looks real. But ask the engineers who worked on it, off the record, and many of them still won't say the strange events were just altitude sickness. Because altitude sickness doesn't explain why entire tool sets vanished overnight. It doesn't explain why some workers, men who weren't superstitious at all, started leaving small offerings near the track before their shifts, just in case. It doesn't fully explain why, to this day, Some sections of that railway are still spoken about in hushed tones by the people who built them. That's the real twist. It's not that the supernatural was definitely proven. It's that even science, even logic, even the most rational engineers on Earth couldn't fully explain everything that happened out there. And when something can't be fully explained, that unanswered space is where fear and fascination live forever. So here's what this story really leaves us with. Sometimes the paths humans are most afraid to walk are the exact same paths that end up connecting us to something greater. That railway didn't just cross Forbidden's land. It connected entire regions, entire communities, entire histories that had been cut off from each other for centuries. Fear and progress, walking the same track at the same time. Maybe that's true in life too. The paths that scare us the most, the ones everyone warns us not to take, are sometimes the very paths that lead somewhere worth reaching. Not because the fear wasn't real, but because some things are only built by people brave enough to keep walking anyway. If this pulled you into that world, hit subscribe, because there are more places like this hiding across this planet. Places humans were warned not to touch. And some of them, we still don't fully understand.